in the serene suburbs of Aurora, Illinois, where cul-de-sacs were lined with manicured lawns and American flags snapped in the breeze. I lived in the lavender-painted spare room of my son David's two-story colonial. At 72, I'd envisioned my retirement as a gentle unwinding, pruning the roses that clung to the backyard trellis, losing myself in the familiar twists of Agatha Christie novels, and sneaking extra marshmallows into my grandkids' hot cocoa when their mother wasn't watching. David, my only child, was a lawyer, his life consumed by depositions, client calls, and late-night emails, leaving the household under the iron rule of his wife, Karen, who managed it with the precision of a drill sergeant. I tried to make myself useful, folding endless piles of laundry, scrubbing pots until they gleamed, or reading bedtime stories to Lily and Max, but my efforts seemed to vanish like morning mist, unacknowledged, unvalued. The tension with Karen didn't erupt overnight. It grew like a slow leak, seeping into every corner of the house. A sharp exhale when I left a teacup on the counter too long. A tight-lipped, "We're fine," Margaret when I offered to chop carrots for dinner. Her gaze would sweep over me, cold and dismissive, as if I were a piece of outdated furniture she couldn't sell. I wasn't blind. I saw her resentment, clear as the polished windows she obsessed over. 3 years ago, I'd sold my modest home in Peoria at David's urging, moving in to help with the kids, to be part of their bustling family. He'd painted it as a win for everyone, grandma nearby, extra hands for Lily and Max. But to Karen, I was an unwelcome guest, a relic cluttering her meticulously curated life. David, stretched thin between his firm and home, tried to bridge the gap with his quiet apologies, but they were fleeting, like a breeze that doesn't cool. The breaking point came on a stifling Tuesday afternoon in July, the air thick with humidity and the faint buzz of cicadas. I was in the living room, sunlight pouring through the bay window, folding a mountain of the kids' clothes, dinosaur socks for Max, glittery leggings for Lily, humming Amazing Grace to keep my hands steady. Karen burst in, her face flushed, eyes wild with a fury that seemed to have been simmering for days. "Margaret, you're useless," she shouted, her voice slicing through the stillness like a blade. "You eat our food, take up space, and do nothing but meddle in my house, dragging us down." I opened my mouth, ready to list my contributions. The nights I'd soothed Lily through fevers, the mornings I'd braided her hair, the hours I'd spent helping Max with his spelling words. But before I could speak, her hand flew up, striking my cheek with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. The sting was sharp, but her next words cut deeper than any blow. "You're dead weight in our lives, go live in the dump." The world seemed to wobble. The socks slipped from my fingers, scattering across the hardwood like confetti from a ruined party. Upstairs, Lily and Max giggled over a board game, their voices a distant, innocent hum against the storm in my chest. David was at the office, likely buried in paperwork, oblivious to the fact that his wife had just struck his mother. My cheek burned, but it was her words that sank into me, heavy as lead. Dead weight. Dump. I wanted to scream, to remind her I raised David alone after his father died in a car crash when he was 9, that I'd worked double shifts at a greasy diner, my feet aching, to pay for his braces, his textbooks, his dreams. I wanted to tell her how I'd given up my home, my quiet life in Peoria, to be here for them. But my voice stayed locked in my throat, and I felt myself shrinking, as if I could melt into the floral couch and disappear. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the quilt my mother had stitched decades ago, its faded squares a map of my past. I couldn't stay. Not after that slap, those words that played on a loop, each repetition grinding me down. I packed a single duffel bag, my wedding photo, its frame chipped but precious, my husband's pocket watch, its faint tick a reminder of steadier days, a wool scarf for the Chicago chill, my worn Bible, its pages soft from years of prayer, and a small album of David's childhood, his gap-toothed grin frozen in time. I didn't leave a note. David would try to fix this, to mediate with his earnest promises, but some wounds are too raw to bandage. At dawn, I called a cab and gave the driver an address I'd found online. A women's shelter in downtown Chicago, a squat gray building nestled between a deli and a laundromat, its windows smudged but solid. The shelter smelled of bleach, instant coffee, and the faint tang of desperation. Rosa, the intake volunteer, had warm brown eyes and a voice like a lullaby, steady and soothing. I told her everything, my words stumbling at first, then flooding out. The slap, the shouting, the years of feeling like a tenant in my son's home, tolerated but never truly wanted. She listened without judgment, her hand resting on mine, and when I finished, she said, "Margaret, you're not dead weight. You're a woman with a story, and it's got chapters left to write." Her words were a spark, igniting something in me I thought had flickered out long ago. The shelter was crowded, with creaky cots and walls so thin I could hear someone's late-night prayers or the soft sobs of a newcomer. I shared a room with Leela, a 50-something woman who'd fled a controlling husband and carried stories of her days as a ballroom dancer in Milwaukee. We'd talk until midnight, her tales of waltzing under chandeliers or tripping over a partner's clumsy feet making me laugh until my sides ached. During the day, I volunteered in the shelter's kitchen, stirring vats of vegetable soup or slicing loaves of day-old bread, the rhythm of the work anchoring me. Rosa helped me find a part-time job at a small library in Evanston, shelving books and guiding patrons to novels, biographies, or tax forms. The quiet of the library, the scent of old pages, reminded me of my childhood dream of being a teacher, a dream I'd buried under years of practicality, marriage, motherhood, survival. David called 12 days later, his voice ragged with worry. "Mom, where are you? Please come back. I'll talk to Karen, I swear." I told him I was safe but kept my location vague. I couldn't return to that house, to the tension that hung like damp laundry, to the fear of another outburst, another hand raised. I missed Lily and Max, their sticky hugs, their endless questions about the stars, their giggles when I let them win at Go Fish. But I needed to rebuild something for myself. The shelter offered classes, basic computer skills, resume writing, budgeting, and I enrolled, fumbling through emails and spreadsheets, skills David had always handled for me. Each small victory, sending an email without help, balancing a budget, felt like reclaiming a piece of the woman I'd been before life wore me down. 10 months later, I had enough saved for a studio apartment in Evanston, a cramped space with a lumpy couch, a kitchenette with a stove that hissed like an irritated cat, and a single window that caught the morning sun. I hung my wedding photo, its frame chipped but cherished, and a picture of David at 6, his grin missing a front tooth. I added a snapshot of Lily and Max from their last visit to my old Peoria house, their faces smeared with ice cream, their eyes bright with summer. I bought a thrift store table, its surface scratched but sturdy, and mismatched plates that felt like treasures. The kids visited on weekends, their chatter filling the air as we baked lopsided cookies or played card games on the floor, crumbs scattering like confetti. David came too, his eyes heavy with guilt, always promising to fix things with Karen. I'd pat his hand and change the subject to Lily's school play or Max's latest soccer goal. I never told him about the slap. Some truths are too heavy for a son to carry, and I wanted him to keep the illusion of his perfect family, at least for now. At the library, I started a book club for seniors, and every Thursday, we'd gather in a corner with wobbly chairs, debating whodunits or sharing stories over weak coffee in paper cups. Leela joined, her laughter as bright as ever, regaling us with tales of dancing in sparkly dresses or dodging a partner's 2 left feet. I found other small joys, planting basil and rosemary in pots by my window, joining a knitting group at the community center where we swapped patterns and gossip, even trying a free yoga class at the local rec center, wobbling through poses but never falling. I started writing letters to old friends from Peoria, rekindling connections I'd let fade, and one of them, Clara, came to visit, her hugs as warm as the diner coffee we used to share. The woman Karen had struck, the one she'd banished to the dump, was gone. The dump wasn't a place. It was the weight of feeling useless, invisible, a burden to those I loved. I'd carried it for years, letting it press me down until I half believed it. But in my little apartment, with sunlight warming the scuffed floor, the kids' drawings taped to the fridge, and the smell of fresh basil in the air, I felt something new. Not just freedom, not just strength, but purpose. I was Margaret, 72, starting over, weaving a new life from the threads of the old. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, and for the first time in decades, I felt like the heroine of my own story, not a footnote in someone else.